Welcome back, sleepyheads. Found your way somewhere colder tonight, surrounded by water, stone, and unfinished business. Before Silas steps into the cell block, a brief word from the voice behind the clock. The one who winds these walks and listens when the walls start talking. Alcatraz, 1962, the night before the escape. A place built to erase hope, now holding its breath as three men prepare to test the meaning of freedom against iron bars in an open sea. No sirens yet, no headlines, just dripping pipes, counting steps, and courage whispered after lights out. It's the perfect place for a quiet walk, where fear paces and freedom waits patiently. If you enjoy drifting through history's locked doors, settle in. Join the sleepy circle. Let's begin.
Chapter 1. The Fog That Erases Footsteps. Welcome in, listeners. I'm Silas, your slightly sleep-deprived tour guide through time, questionable decisions, and places you definitely wouldn't want to spend the night unless you have a strange fascination with concrete, confinement, and poor life choices. If you enjoy my voice, softly narrating humanity's more adventurous evenings, go ahead and like the video. It helps more dreamers wander in without me needing to escape from anywhere. And subscribe, tap the bell, tell me where you're listening from. I promise I won't stalk you, unless you're hiding somewhere on Alcatraz in 1962. In that case, well, we may both need a raft. I pause as the wind brushes past me, an icy hiss curling around my collar. Now, take a deep breath, slow, easy. Let the outside world fall away. We're going back to a night dripping with fog and tension, a night that embarrassed the Bureau of Prisons, baffled the FBI, and refuses, quite stubbornly, to give up its secrets. June 11th, 1962. The night three men slipped through the cracks of the most escape-proof prison in America. The first thing I notice as the boat nudges against the Alcatraz dock is the fog. This isn't gentle, storybook fog, the kind that hugs a lighthouse and whispers about tea kettles. No, this fog is the kind that looks like it ate the lighthouse and is now slowly chewing on the rest of the world. I step onto the slick concrete, boots tapping softly, and the cold wraps around me like a damp towel with abandonment issues. The visibility is so low that I can barely make out the guard tower above me, only the faint outline of metal legs stretching upward like a spider trying not to be noticed. It doesn't help that a spotlight sweeps through the mist, slicing a bright cone of light just in front of my chest. Good evening to you, too, I mumble under my breath, glad one of us is paying attention. I adjust the clipboard in my hand, the single most important tool in my survival arsenal tonight. Why? Because tonight, I am not Silas the Sleepy Storyteller. Tonight, I am Silas Graveyard Shift Structural Inspector, a role so painfully dull and bureaucratic that even the guards don't have the energy to question it. You'd be amazed how far a clipboard and a tired expression can get you in a federal penitentiary. A gust of wind slams into the dock, carrying with it the roar of the tide smashing against the rocks below. The sound vibrates through the concrete, deep, hungry, relentless. It's a reminder of the real warden of this island, the frigid, unforgiving San Francisco Bay. Escape-proof, they said. Not because of the walls, because of the water. I start walking. The incline from the dock toward the prison is steeper than you'd expect. Maybe it's the fog, or maybe it's the ghostly knowledge that just hours from now, three men will use this very slope, as memory, as myth, as legend. My lantern casts a dull circle of light ahead of me, illuminating patches of chipped concrete and tufts of grass that seem confused about their life choices. I keep my shoulders squared, clipboard tucked neatly beneath my arm, because the thing about sneaking around is you never want to look like you're sneaking around. You want to look like you're late for a meeting you don't want to attend, which is essentially prison energy, distilled. The fog thickens as I reach the first landing. The guard tower looms above me, barely visible. The spotlight moves again, slow, searching, methodical, cutting across the fog like a blade looking for something to regret. It misses me by maybe 6 inches. Perfect cover, I whisper. Perfect danger. The administration building sits directly ahead, its shape half swallowed by the fog. The cracked eagle emblem above the entrance still clings to the facade, a proud symbol of American authority that now looks like it's survived too many bad days and questionable budget decisions. The building gives off the vibe of a stern principal's office crossed with a mausoleum. Even through the fog shroud, the windows appear dark and watchful, and because this is 1962, half the bulbs inside flicker like they're being haunted by the ghosts of electrical regulations yet to be written. I pause here. Not because I need to, but because this is the threshold between the world of authority and the world of confinement. And tonight, the line between them will fail spectacularly. I take a slow breath, letting the cold burn through my lungs. This building, I say softly, is where men with polished shoes and polished egos insisted, again and again, that escape from Alcatraz was impossible. Behind these walls, reports were written, punishments were issued, warnings were ignored. What none of them realized was that tonight, right now, 3 men, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, are waiting, listening, counting breaths, preparing to crawl through a vent no bigger than a household toaster slot. This building, with its chipped stone and weathered emblem, doesn't know it yet, but its certainty, its authority, its unshakable belief in control is about to be humiliated. The fog presses in tighter, like it wants to hear the story too. I walk closer to the entrance, my boots cracking lightly over small pebbles embedded in the concrete. The tide booms beneath the island, a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself in footsteps. Sometimes it announces itself in currents. The spotlight makes another pass, this time slower, lingering near the dock as if suddenly suspicious. I flatten myself against the wall, pretending to check a note on my clipboard. Yes, the structural integrity of this wall-shaped wall seems very wall-like, I mutter, just loud enough for my own amusement. A snort escapes before I can stop it. Dark humor, I've learned, helps you breathe in places that prefer you didn't. The guard's shadow shifts, then moves on. As I stand at the entrance of the administration building, the night feels heavier, denser, like the island is holding its breath. Somewhere deeper in the prison, the 3 men destined for infamy are finishing their last preparations. Papier-mâché heads with stolen hair already lie tucked under their blankets. Tools crafted from spoons and stolen saw blades wait beneath vents carved over months. In a few hours, this entire place will erupt. FBI agents will swarm. Boats will circle. Reports will multiply faster than excuses at a high school reunion. And someone, somewhere in this building, will mutter the immortal bureaucratic phrase, "Well, that wasn't supposed to happen." But not yet. Right now, the island is quiet, deceptively so. The fog moves like it has a heartbeat. The tide roars like it has opinions, and the spotlight circles like an unblinking eye that somehow just keeps missing what matters. I take one last look at the cracked eagle. Authority, I whisper, just another thing people escape from. I push open the door and step into the next shadow. Chapter 2. Narrow Doors, Narrow Chances. The door to the administration building sighs shut behind me, and for a second I'm wrapped in the soft echo of old paperwork and old arguments. Then the corridor spills me out toward the next threshold, the place where people stopped being visitors and officially became residents. The Sally Port. Even the name sounds like something that should be friendly. It isn't. It's a concrete throat built for swallowing men whole. I walk down a short hallway that kinks to the right, then to the left, as if the building is changing its mind about letting me through. My lantern throws a wavering circle of light ahead of me. The air's colder here, with that particular institutional smell, disinfectant, damp stone, and the faint, metallic aftertaste of fear. It's the kind of scent that never fully leaves a place, even decades later. Like the building developed its own nervous system. The Sally Port opens around me, thick walls, low ceiling, heavy steel doors at either end. It's a bottleneck, designed so that no one goes in or out without being counted, questioned, and quietly judged. The fluorescent lights overhead buzz with the thin confidence of aging technology. Then, without warning, they flicker. One sharp flash, then another, then the whole ceiling stutters like a panicked heartbeat. My shadow jumps from one wall to the other, stretching long and thin, like it's trying to escape ahead of me. And then, for one breath, the lights go almost completely out. Darkness drops over me like a hood. I stop walking. It's not just that I can't see. It's that I can suddenly feel everything. The cold against my cheeks, the smooth metal of the clipboard under my fingertips, the distant roar of the bay, outside, pulsing through the walls, my own breathing, quietly insistent in my ears. For that second, with the lights hanging on by a thread, I get a taste, just a taste, of what the men in their cells are gambling tonight. Walking blind, with no guarantee there's anything on the other side except deeper darkness. The lights cough back to life, buzzing louder now, like they're offended at their own performance. My shadow snaps back into place at my feet. I let out a slow breath I'd apparently been holding and roll my shoulders. "Don't worry," I tell the ceiling softly. "You're not the only thing about to fail inspection tonight." Above me, from somewhere on the upper catwalk, comes the steady thump of boots. Slow, deliberate, unhurried, a guard pacing his route, probably more concerned about his next cup of coffee than the fact that 3 inmates beneath him are about to attempt something every report says is impossible. That's the thing about certainty. It makes people lazy, and laziness is a gift to anyone planning an escape. I pass through the second steel door, its hinges complaining in a low groan, and step out toward the heart of the island. As I walk, I start talking, half to myself, half to you. "Let's lay out the players," I murmur. "If you're going to fall asleep to this, you might as well know who's risking their lives for the privilege of never hearing a cell door slam again." First, Frank Morris. Brilliant. Quiet. A man who treated rules the way other people treat crossword puzzles. He studied them, learned their patterns, found their weak spots. Every prison he'd ever been in, he treated like a problem that hadn't been solved yet. Then the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, bank robbers, strong swimmers, grew up in Florida, used to cold water and bad ideas, the kind of brothers who didn't ask, "Is this safe?" so much as, "Are we doing it together?" They met Morris in Atlanta, then again here on, this rock. 3 men with matching resentments and compatible talents. It was only a matter of time before they looked at each other and said, "So, you thinking what I'm thinking?" Their plan wasn't impulsive, it wasn't romantic, it was work. Night after night, they chiseled at the crumbling concrete around the vents in their cells, using converted tools. A drill made from a stolen motor, flattened spoons, whatever they could scavenge and sharpen without drawing attention. They hid the noise under the cover of loud music from the prison band and the hum of evening routines. They disguised the widening holes with cardboard and paint. They built dummy heads from soap, toilet paper, and hair swiped from the barber shop to fool guards during the nightly count. And, above all that, they stole prison-issued raincoats, one at a time, and stitched them into a raft and life vests. More than 50 of them. It was like the world's least charming craft project. This, I say as I walk toward the looming outline of another structure, is what hope looks like when it's forced underground. It stops being pretty and starts being practical. The shape ahead of me resolves into the bulk of the powerhouse. If Alcatraz is a body, this is the organ that kept its muscles tense and its lights cruel. The building hunched against the wind, heavy and square, with tall windows that have lost more arguments with the weather than they've won. Some panes are missing. Others are cracked in delicate spider webs. Rust streaks down the walls like old tears. As I approach, the wind picks up, threading through those broken windows. It rushes in and out of the building with a low, continuous howl, making the whole structure sound like it's breathing. My lantern throws light over the door, its paint peeling in layers, revealing older shades beneath. I pull it open and step inside. The air here is colder still, tinged with the dusty scent of old machinery and oil. The main floor is a cathedral of rusting metal. Hulking generators, thick cables, silent panels of gauges and dials that once tracked every flicker of power running through the prison. Tonight, they sit lifeless. But I can almost hear what they used to sound like. The steady hum, the clicking relays, the comforting, authoritarian buzz of everything under control. I walk slowly, footsteps soft against the concrete. Every now and then, the wind pushes harder against the broken windows and the whole building shudders. Glass rattles in loose frames. A metal panel somewhere overhead bangs once, then settles, like the island is flinching. This place, I say quietly, used to keep the lights on in every corridor, every cell, every watchtower. It powered the alarms, the electric locks, the illusion that nothing here could ever change. I rest a hand on one of the cold generators. But tonight, something's off, isn't it? Because while the wires and circuits in this building did their job, another kind of power was building elsewhere, in whispered conversations, in stolen tools, in men who refused to accept that the story was already written. Outside, a wave hits the rock with a thunderous crash. The sound punches through the walls and rolls through the empty space, bouncing off metal and concrete. I think about the water out there, the freezing current, the riptides, the way the bay doesn't care who you were or what you planned. Frank, John, and Clarence are betting everything on the idea that they can cross that black, shifting void on a handmade rubber raft while the rest of the world sleeps. People like to say it was suicidal, I murmur. But then, staying here wasn't exactly a wellness retreat either. Above me, faint but distinct, I hear the guard's boots again, pacing, turning, pacing. He has no idea that the power that matters tonight isn't in these dead generators or the silent control panels. It's in 3 minds, already halfway out of their cells. I let my fingers drum lightly on the edge of the metal housing, like I'm taking the pulse of a patient whose heart is still beating, but not quite right. The island feels it, I say softly. Something's about to break. My lantern flickers once, just for a second, like it's agreeing with me. I take one last look at the dark, rattling shell of the powerhouse, then turn toward the doorway, where the fog presses against the thresholds and the night waits with held breath. Time to go deeper. Chapter 3. Whispers Before the Storm Breaks. The wind hits me the second I leave the powerhouse, a cold slap that feels vaguely personal, like the island disapproves of my tour route. Fog drags itself across the ground in long, tattered ribbons. Every few steps, I hear the low moan of metal expanding in the night air, the whole prison muttering to itself like an old man who refuses to retire. The path dips slightly as I make my way toward the recreation yard. Inmates used to call it the yard, with a kind of reluctant affection, the way a person might talk about an annoying cousin who still shows up at every family gathering. Tonight, the place waits in silence, stretched wide and empty under a thin wash of moonlight. I step through the second gate, and the air changes around me, lighter somehow, as if the space is exhaling after decades of holding its breath. The concrete beneath my boots is cracked in places, worn smooth in others, a patchwork of history and resignation. The pull-up bars stand in the center, rusted and swaying gently in the wind, like gallows from a time that wasn't quite sure if it was ancient or modern. Moonlight bleeds across everything, turning the yard into a grayscale world where shadows have longer stories than the living. I stop walking because something prickles across the back of my neck. Not danger, something stranger. A shift in the air, a tightening of the atmosphere, like the island, has paused mid-thought. Then I see it. Behind the barred windows looking down over the yard, shapes begin to rise, one by one, slow, unhurried, silent. They stand at attention behind their bars, staring out at the moonlit yard with the solemnity of soldiers who forgot how to blink. It's eerie in the way only things rooted in routine can be. A phantom count. Not commanded, not necessary, just muscle memory performing a task burned too deeply to erase. I can hear the scrape of a few bunk springs settling under shifting weight. The faint clink of metal against metal as someone grips the bars. These men, real once, long gone now, had patterns built into their bones. The same ritual, every night at the same hour, for years. And on this night, the night before the island's most infamous breach, they rise again, as if something in the atmosphere has tugged them upward. Even the ghosts here are punctual, I whisper. A wind slides through the yard, stirring the dust. Brushes over the bars, slips past the standing silhouettes, then funnels toward the west wall. I follow it, lantern in hand, heading toward the long walkway that runs alongside D Block. The west wall walkway stretches into darkness like a corridor carved into the edge of the world. The fog hangs low along it, swirling around my ankles, giving the uneasy impression that the ground might drop off if I walk too far. The wall to my right is scarred concrete, etched with decades of weather, salt, and the peculiar pressure of hopelessness. To my left, the island falls away toward the rocks in the pounding bay. Somewhere, far off, a gull screams into the night, a sound that should be comical, but out here registers more like a warning. I take a few steps, and that's when it happens. A violent crash detonates inside D Block, metal slamming into metal with the kind of force that makes the air shiver. I freeze, The sound echoes down the walkway, ricocheting off the walls. It's the kind of noise that usually has a follow-up. Shouting, hurried boots, keys jangling, something, anything. But this time, nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just a silence so thick it feels deliberate. I move closer to the wall, ears straining. D-Block sits on the other side, home to the worst troublemakers and the most disciplined. The men here learned 2 survival skills very early on: how to endure pain and how to make noise disappear. The darkness along the walkway deepens as I reach the midpoint. My lantern flickers once, but only because the wind has found a new angle of attack. The island is a maze of wind tunnels, one of nature's less charming jokes. I tighten my grip on the handle and let my eyes adjust to the murk. Not the first time this place has behaved strangely, I murmur, mostly to make the silence feel less intentional. Alcatraz has a long history of things going missing. I walk again, slower now, my boots scuffing softly. The wind pushes at my back, hurrying me along like it wants me off this walkway. In 1937, I say, 2 men, Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe, vanished during a storm so violent it knocked out visibility. They slipped out of the workshop area, made it to the water, and then I gesture vaguely toward the black expanse on my left. Nothing. No bodies, no sightings, no closure. The official record says they drowned. Unofficially, well, the bay has a habit of keeping secrets as well as it keeps corpses. The fog curls upward along the wall, almost listening. And on a night like this, I continue, when the air feels like a held breath and the past feels close enough to tap on your shoulder, it's easy to believe Alcatraz lets go of its mysteries only when it feels like it. I hear another soft noise behind me, just a whisper of movement. I turn, lantern raised, but there's nothing there. Only the empty yard behind me and the silhouettes still standing in their windows, frozen in that ritual posture. I keep going down the walkway, the stone cold under my boots. D-Block looms at my right, like a sleeping animal I'd really prefer not to wake. Every now and then, the building seems to shift its weight, creaking, settling, muttering threats in its sleep. Near the far end, the air feels heavier again, like the walkway has thickened. The fog presses harder. The silence deepens. Even the bay seems to pause its assault against the rocks. Something electric hangs over the island. Not literal electricity. Powerhouse has already given up on that tonight. But the kind of charged anticipation that stirs before something significant breaks. I stop walking and listen. Nothing moves, nothing breathes, nothing breaks the surface of the night. And yet, the entire place feels like a taut wire, pulled tight, waiting for the moment, any moment now when everything snaps. That's the strange thing about prisons. Even the stones know when someone is about to run. I let the silence settle a moment longer, then turn toward the path that will take me deeper into the heart of Alcatraz. Behind me, the phantom inmates remain frozen in their ghostly count. Ahead of me, the island waits, poised in the breath before the storm. Time to enter the next shadow. Chapter 4. 4 Men, 3 Fates. The walkway funnels me toward D-Block like a bad idea you can't talk yourself out of. Even before I reach the door, the temperature drops, the kind of cold that feels less like weather and more like a personality trait the building developed out of spite. The air here is different, tighter, sharper, like the stone itself is holding its breath. I pull the heavy door open, and the hinges complain with a groan that echoes too far for comfort. D-Block waits inside, long, narrow, and utterly unforgiving. The second I step through, I feel it settle over me. That weight of other people's regrets, their anger, their boredom, their fear, all of it baked into the walls like old smoke. This was the block for the worst of them, or the ones the guards treated like the worst. Some were violent, some were broken, some just had the misfortune of being difficult in a place where difficulty had consequences. The cold intensifies as I walk deeper, and the lantern's glow feels small here, swallowed by concrete that has heard too many secrets to be impressed by one more. I pass the first few cells, empty now, but still holding shadows like they're renting storage space. The bars cast long black lines across the floor, stripes of absence. I'm not easily spooked, but if the island had decided to whisper something in my ear right now, I wouldn't have been surprised. The row bends slightly, and that's when I see them. It takes a moment for my eyes to adjust, not because of the darkness, but because my brain wants to insist that what I'm seeing shouldn't be possible. But Alcatraz has already made it clear it doesn't much care about my brain. Frank Morris sits on the edge of his bunk, elbows on his knees, hands dangling. He looks calm at first, almost lazy. But when I step closer, I see the truth. His fingers tremble just a little. It's subtle, the kind of shake a man gets not from fear, but from adrenaline and timing and the knowledge that everything he has worked for comes down to right now. The records never mention this detail, but then, records tend to prefer their heroes unshakable and their villains uncomplicated. Frank lifts his head slightly, like he hears something only he understands. Maybe it's the guard boots on the catwalk. Maybe it's the roar of the tide outside. Maybe it's the ticking clock inside his own ribs. He doesn't look at me. But he doesn't have to. His entire body says the same thing. If I move now, I live. If I hesitate, I rot. I move to the next cell. John Anglin is pacing. Not quickly, not nervously, but with the steady, focused stride of a man who has rehearsed his escape down to the angle of they're inseparable. The next cell is the last one, the one the world forgets to mention, except in footnotes. Alan West. He's crouched near the back wall, shoulders hunched, scraping at the concrete around his vent with furious, bleeding fingertips. The hole is almost big enough. Almost. But almost is a cruel word on an island like this. His breath comes in sharp bursts, each one tinged with panic. He keeps digging, clawing, trying to widen those last stubborn inches of concrete. The vent opens into the crawl space the others used, but it might as well be miles away. He won't make it. The realization hits me as hard as it hits him, though for different reasons. His shoulders jerk with a frustrated sob he won't allow out loud. He pauses only long enough to wipe sweat from his eyes with the back of a shaking hand, smearing blood into his hairline. Then he starts again, and again, and again. Freedom sometimes comes down to minutes, or millimeters. I take a step back from the bars, letting the weight of it settle. It's strange. History always talks about the three who escaped, but the story feels incomplete without the one who didn't. The man who helped plan every detail, who dug night after night, who built the dummy head for his bed, and who was betrayed not by fear, but by stubborn concrete. The silence grows heavier around me, as if the air itself has grown thick. I move on, deeper into D block, toward the solitary cells at the far end. Cell 14D, the hole, waits like a punishment that has somehow lingered even after the men inside it have vanished. The door stands open, rusted around the edges. I lift the lantern and shine it inside. Only darkness stares back. The air inside is colder still, the kind of cold that knows things, the kind that has heard too much screaming and not enough forgiveness. I lean closer. At first, there's nothing. Then, so soft it almost blends into the breath of the fog filtering through the cracks. Shh, clink, shh, clink. The unmistakable sound of metal being filed, a ghostly echo, a memory, a loop the island has refused to stop playing. It's not the present. It's not the past. It's both, layered over each other in a place that has never learned how to forget. I step back from the doorway as the sound fades again, swallowed whole by the cold. The island is awake now, and every shadow knows what's coming. Time to walk deeper into the night. Chapter 5. The Tools of Ghosts. The deeper I walk through D Block, the more the air settles around me like a cold accusation. Behind me, the cells of Morris and the Anglin sit quiet now, 3 shadows of 3 choices already made. The weight of what they've done lingers in the concrete like a scent. It's not fear exactly, more like calculation, intention, a kind of whispered promise drifting through the vents. I'm heading toward the exit that leads into the main cell house, the part of Alcatraz that was always awake, always patrolled, always ready to crush hope under regulation and routine. Broadway, the central artery. The place guards walked like they owned the concept of vigilance. As I approach the threshold, I can already picture it beyond the door. Straight lines, bright lights, boots hitting concrete in practiced rhythm. This was the channel through which every inmate flowed. Meals, movement, muster, and misery. A place so exposed, the idea of slipping through it unnoticed feels laughable. And that's exactly what makes me stop and reflect. Because the escape plan didn't just require courage or desperation, it demanded strategy, audacity, a chess player's patience. 3 men had to carve silently through concrete, time their moves to the guards' blind spots, memorize every sound the prison made, all while living under the constant drone of surveillance. Alcatraz wasn't just guarded, it was over-guarded. Watchtowers, searches, counts, rules layered on rules. Even thinking about escape was a violation. Pulling it off. That required a blueprint written in stolen tools, sleepless nights, and the kind of focus normally reserved for bomb technicians and kindergarten teachers. I'm about to step into the light of the main corridor when something twitches at the corner of my vision. A shift of fabric, a shape on a bunk, a suggestion of someone breathing who shouldn't be. I turn around slowly. The cell behind me looks empty at first, just a rectangle of bars and shadow. But then I see it, a head resting on the pillow, and not a real one, a fake one, painted with uncanny care, hair arranged just so, cheeks shaped from soap and tissue, eyes angled to mimic sleep. It's one of their dummy heads. For a moment, I just stand there, letting the cold slide down my spine like an unwelcome friend. It's eerie in a way the empty cells weren't. Dead quiet, almost smug. Because this isn't hope, it's deceit perfected. It's craftsmanship weaponized. I step closer, not to touch it, but to understand it. The moonlight filtering through the bars gives the head a faint sheen, as if it's breathing under the blanket. If I were a guard, bone-tired, doing rounds at 2 a.m. with a flashlight, expecting nothing unusual, I'd believe the man was asleep. I'd check him off the list, and I'd walk on to the next. That's the part that gets me. Not the artistry, not the creativity, the psychology. These men weren't just escaping. They were performing, using the guards' routines as props, their assumptions as tools. The head stares up through the dark with a blank little smile, frozen in the moment of its greatest triumph. I step back, the chill following me all the way to the door. Time to face Broadway. I slip out a D-block and into the glare of the main corridor. The lights here are brighter, humming angrily overhead, electricity flexing its authority, pretending the powerhouse hasn't flickered twice tonight like a nervous eye. Twitch. Broadway runs between B and C blocks, stretching long and straight, the perfect place for guards to keep watch. Even now, with no boots marching, no keys jangling, the place feels supervised, seen, judged. I walk down the center of it, lantern held low. The space hums with energy that isn't there anymore. Arguments, jokes, orders, footsteps, residual echoes, 1,000 tiny dramas played out between walls that never softened. Tonight, the corridor feels tense. Not dangerous exactly, just expectant. Like the island knows something has changed, even if the guards don't yet. I follow the hall toward the quieter wing where the library sits. The air shifts as I get closer, less authoritative, more contemplative, as if even the ghosts here understand libraries deserve a different kind of silence. The library door is cracked open, tilted slightly inward like a beckoning finger or an oversight no one bothered to fix. I push it with my fingertips and it glides open with a whisper soft enough to make the hairs on my arms stir. Inside, the dust floats like ash in slow spirals. Moonlight streams through the barred windows in pale spears, illuminating long-forgotten books and abandoned papers. Every table is a frozen thought. Every chair looks like someone meant to come back but didn't. I wander between the aisles, brushing a hand along cracked spines. Some of the books have titles worn off completely, their covers faded to anonymous shades of tired brown. Others remain bold: political theory, maritime navigation, basic electrical repair, English grammar for the determined. And then, on the table nearest the center, one lies open: Great Escapes of History. I blink. Okay, I whisper. I know this place has a flair for the dramatic, but that feels a little on the nose. The pages show diagrams of tunnels, daring breakouts, men scaling impossible walls. It's the kind of book someone might have read for entertainment, or for inspiration. Officially, the FBI insists Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers drowned. Officially, their raft didn't survive the freezing currents, and the bay claimed them the same way it claimed Cole and Rowe back in '37. But the case still open. And then there's that 2013 letter, allegedly from John Anglin, saying they survived, lived quiet lives, escaped the escape. The handwriting shaky, the tests inconclusive, the possibility lingering like a half-finished sentence. Authentic or not, the fact remains. 3 men crawled through darkness, vanished into water that kills most swimmers, and left behind nothing but questions. I close the book gently. Some escapes are clean, some are messy, and some become myths because the truth refuses to come to the surface. The library exhales around me. Time to head upward, toward the final shadow of this night. Chapter 6, Where the Wind Carries Secrets. I leave the library behind, letting the door whisper shut at my back. The corridor ahead feels different now. Not just quiet, but charged, as if the island is running out of patience with my wandering. The lantern flickers once, then steadies. I take it as a warning, or encouragement. Hard to tell with lanterns. They're emotionally distant like that. The workshop sits near the far end of the cell house, tucked into the bones of the structure like a secret the island only shares when it wants to. The door is half open, a thin strip of darkness waiting for company. I step inside, boots crunching on grit that hasn't moved since the last inmate was forced to sweep it. The air tastes metallic. Old sawdust, rust, forgotten sweat. Workbenches line the walls, their surfaces scattered with debris. Stripped wires, broken brushes, dull tools that once hummed with purpose. Even abandoned, the place hums with a strange energy, a residue of frantic last-minute preparations, of hands working quickly under the cover of routine. This is where the stolen motors were repurposed, where spoon handles were flattened into chisels, where raincoats, 50 of them, were stitched into a raft no sane man would trust. The lantern light slides across a bench where a thin strip of rubber still curls like a shed snakeskin. Morris and the Anglins touch this place. Their fingerprints are long gone, but their urgency is still here, vibrating faintly under the surface. Another flicker overhead, this one harder. The bulbs sputter, coughing out dim bursts of orange light. For a heartbeat, the entire workshop glows and darkens, like something breathing in the rafters, or like the island is blinking at me, unimpressed by my persistence. "Relax," I whisper, lifting my lantern. "I'm leaving." The lights buzz irritably, but hold. A narrow stairway waits in the corner, a cramped metal spine spiraling upward toward the roof. The wind outside becomes a muffled, restless howl, like it knows what I'm about to see and would prefer I reconsider. I start climbing. Each step creaks beneath my weight, the metal vibrating under the push of the storm. The higher I go, the colder it gets, the kind of cold that digs its knuckles into your ribs and insists it's staying for the night. At the top, the hatch to the roof is cracked open. Wind pours through the gap in violent bursts, slapping the lantern flame sideways. I push it open with my shoulder, bracing against the force. The rooftop greets me with a scream of air. The wind is a living thing up here, angry, impatient, clawing at my coat like it wants to tear me backward. Fog whips across the concrete in long streaks, erasing the world beyond a few feet. Below, the bay roars with its usual opinionated fury. I lower my head and push forward, boots sliding slightly on the damp surface. The lantern is almost useless now. The wind keeps yanking the flame sideways like a toddler throwing a tantrum. I shield it with my hand and move toward the far ledge, toward the vent exit where the escapees surfaced hours ago. The grate lies half-detached, bent outward like a set of broken ribs. Dark scrape marks fan outward across the concrete, evidence of knees and elbows dragged upward in a hurry. I crouch, shining the lantern into the opening. The shaft yawns downward, a dark throat leading into the crawlspace where they navigated by touch alone. The storm shoves against me, tugging at my clothing. "Easy," I mutter. "I'm just visiting." I stand and step closer to the ledge, and that's when I hear it. A faint splash, soft but unmistakable. Then another, slightly farther out, swallowed quickly by the wind. I lean forward, gripping the edge of the concrete. Below the fog and the black churn of the bay, three shapes glide quietly across the water. A raft, handcrafted, raincoat seams sealed with stolen glue. Three silhouettes hunched low, paddling silently into the night. History often imagines them as frantic or reckless, but from here they look calm, focused, moving with a purpose so sharp it could cut through the fog itself. The wind howls, almost drowning the sound, but I hear one more faint splash, paddle against water, before the shadows dissolve into the bay's vast, hungry darkness. The island groans behind me, as if realizing too late that something has slipped from its grip. I stay there a moment, watching the water churn and settle. The fog swallows everything again, leaving only the rhythmic, indifferent slap of waves against rock. 3 men. 3 ghosts of possibility. 3 fates the world has argued about for decades. Maybe they drowned. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they outswam history itself. Courage and fear often look identical from the outside. Only the person taking the leap knows which one they're feeling, and sometimes even they're not sure. I turn back toward the hatch, lantern low, coat snapping wildly in the wind. The rooftop feels emptier now, as if the island is already rewriting the story in its stone memory, adjusting to the absence of 3 men who were never supposed to be more than numbers. Some escapes change the world, some simply change the night, and some become myths because the truth refuses to surface. As I descend the narrow stairs, the wind's scream fades, replaced by the soft hum of the cell house below, a hum that has no idea what has just happened above it. My footsteps echo down the corridor. The lantern steadies, the island exhales. Some prisons we escape, I murmur, letting the words settle into the stone. Some prisons escape with us. I pause, letting the silence embrace the thought. Then I breathe out, lowering my voice for you, the listener who has followed me this far through fog, concrete, and rumor. Sleep well, sleepy heads. The circle stays lit, even when the footsteps fade.